Good morning, boys and girls. Today I'm going to read to you The Boy Who Loved Math, The Improbable Life of Paul Erdos. This is by Deborah Heiligman. There once was a boy who loved math. He grew up to be one of the greatest mathematicians who ever lived, and it all started with a problem. Paul Erdos lived in Budapest, Hungary with his mama. Mama loved Paul to infinity. Paul loved Mama too. When he was 3, Mama had to go back to work as a math teacher. She didn't want anything bad to happen to Paul, so she left him with the one person she knew would take very good care of him. She left him with Fraulein. Fraulein had too many rules. That was the problem. Paul hated rules. He hated to be told when to sit still, when to eat, and when to go to sleep. What could Paul do? He couldn't exactly solve the problem, but Paul knew that when summer came, Mama would be home with him all day, 100% of the time. So he taught himself to count really high. Then he figured out how many days it would be until summer vacation. It made him feel much better to know the number. So Paul kept counting and thinking about numbers. One day when he was 4, Paul asked the visitor when her birthday was. She told him. "What year were you born?" he asked. She told him. "What time?" She told him. Paul thought for a moment, then he told her how many seconds she had been alive. 1,009,152,358 seconds. Paul liked that trick. He did it often. Paul played with numbers. He added them together, subtracted them. One day he subtracted a big number from a smaller number. The answer was less than 0. How could a number be less than 0? Mama told him numbers below 0 are called negative numbers. Paul thought that was so cool. Now he knew for sure he wanted to be a mathematician when he grew up. But first he had to tackle another big problem. School! Mama sent him to school, of course, when it was time, but Paul and school were not a good match. Paul could not sit still for long, so he got up and ran around the classroom. But that was against the rules. Oh, how Paul hated rules. How could he solve the problem? Paul told Mama he wanted to go to school anymore. Not for one more day, not for 0 days. He wished he could take days away, negative school days. He pleaded with Mama to stay home. Luckily, Mama was a worrier. She worried about germs a lot. She worried Paul could catch dangerous germs from the children at school. So she helped him solve his problem. She said he could stay home with Fraulein. But even Fraulein was better than school, maybe 500 times better. Fraulein and Mama did everything for Paul. They cut his meat, buttered his bread, got him dressed, and tied his shoes. That was great. It meant Paul could think about numbers all day. Numbers were his best friends. He could always depend on numbers to be there and behave in the same way. Numbers followed rules. He didn't like rules in life, but he liked rules in numbers. And so Paul turned 7, then 8, then 9. And when Paul was 10, he fell in love. He fell in love with prime numbers. Prime numbers are special. They can't be divided evenly. A prime number can only be divided by 1 and itself. The first prime number is 2. All the other prime numbers are odd. The numbers are 3, 5, and 7. These are all prime, but not all odd numbers are prime. 9 isn't prime because you can multiply 3 times 3 and get 9. Paul had a lot of questions about prime numbers. Do they go on forever? Is there a pattern to them? Why is it that the higher up you go, the farther apart the numbers are? that are prime. Paul loved to think about prime numbers. When he got older, Paul went to high school. He liked school a million times better now. He made many friends, people his age, who loved math and were really good at it too. Paul and his friends did math together all over Budapest, but Paul was the best. He loved being at the top in math and at the top of towers and mountains and buildings too. He thought about math, whatever he was doing, wherever he was. By the time Paul was 20, he was already famous around the world for his math. People called him the magician from Budapest, but he still did not know how to do his laundry or cook his food or butter his bread. That was not a problem. He still lived at home, and Mama still did everything for him. But then one day, when Paul was 21, some mathematicians invited him to go to England to work on his math. Could he survive out in the world on his own? He rode the train by himself. He met the mathematicians. They all went to dinner. Everyone else talked and ate, but Paul stared at his bread. He stared at his butter. He didn't know how to butter his bread. Finally, he took his knife, put some butter on it, and spread it on his bread. He did it. It wasn't so hard, he said. Even though he could now butter his own bread, Paul soon realized that he didn't fit into the world in a regular way. He wasn't the kind of person to cook or clean or drive a car or have a wife and children. He wasn't the kind of person to live in one place and have one job. He was the kind of person to do math all of the time. And he still didn't like to follow rules. So he invented his own way to live. Here is what he did. Paul would get on an airplane with two small suitcases filled with everything he owned, a few clothes and some math notebooks. He might have $20 in his pocket or less. He flew from New York to Indiana and to Los Angeles. He flew across the world from Toronto to Australia. I have no home, he declared. The world is my home. And wherever he went, when he got there, the same thing would happen. A mathematician would meet him and take him home. The mathematician and Paul worked on math. Paul played with the mathematician's epsilons. That's what Paul called children, because an epsilon is a very small amount of math, a very small amount in math. And just as Mama had done, friends all over the world took care of Paul. They did his laundry, cooked his food, cut open his grapefruit. Now Paul wasn't the easiest house guest. He made messes, big messes, like the time he got impatient and opened a tomato juice carton by stabbing it with a knife. And he often woke up his host at 4 in the morning and said, "My brain is open." That meant he was ready to do math. He wanted to do math about 19 hours a day, every single day. So 19 hours times 7 days is 133 hours a week of math. One time when he was a young man, he broke a rule that got him into big trouble. He climbed over a fence to look at a radio tower. He got arrested. The police thought he was a spy. The FBI thought he was a spy. So they spied on him for years after that. Why did friends all over the world put up with him and take care of him, call him Uncle Paul and love him? Because Paul Erdos was a genius and he shared his brain. He helped people with their math problems and gave them more problems to do. Plus, he was a math matchmaker. He introduced mathematicians all over the world to one another so they could work together. Paul knew that. Paul and his friends did so much great math. They worked in math called number theory, combinatorics, the probabilistic method, and set theory. Paul showed his friends how to do this math in new and better ways. He even started some new kinds of math. Some of the math Paul and his friends worked on gave us better computers, better search engines on the computer, and also better codes for spies to use. Uncle Paul was generous with his brain and his money, too. Whatever money he had, he gave away. He gave money to poor people. He offered prize money for unsolved math problems. Even when Paul got very old, he still did math. He did math while he played chess. He did math while he drank coffee. Lots and lots of coffee. He thought about math while he played ping pong with his best friends. Paul said he never wanted to stop doing math, and he didn't. To stop doing math, Paul said, was to die. So Paul left this world while he was at a math meeting. Aww. All over the world, mathematicians still talk about and love Uncle Paul. Even Paul, who never met him, they talked about their Erdos number. If you did math with Paul, you got an Erdos number of 1. If you worked with someone who worked with Paul, your Erdos number is 2. People are so proud of their Erdos numbers. A long time ago, there was a boy who loved math. Numbers were his best friends. He grew up to be the man who loved math. Numbers and people were his best friends. Paul Erdos had no problem with that. Aww, what a great story. How many of you are like that? You'll be surprised. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you. Bye.